All right, so welcome back to part 2. We are very excited. Obviously, we got really deep into the conversation, but we weren't quite finished. So now we're going to move on into disputes, and then where we are really excited for where agentic banking is today, where it's going, and where you are ready for it, whether you believe it or not. I really love the perspective, Tylen, of having that where you build it for your bank, that it's not that you're going to come in with these black box rules of this is how it's done. It's really you own it. You build it to the specifications of what your customers are either asking for, what you're willing to give them access to at this time. And I think it's also a way to kind of safely onboard, right? It's like we're not giving you keys to the kingdom, but we are going to test it. We are going to look to see, does this even work for our customers? Does this work for what solutions we have? If not, then maybe it doesn't make sense. But if we are looking to innovate and to bank our current customers, kids and grandkids, maybe this is the way to move forward. And I was thinking, as you guys were talking, I was like, you know what? I think there is another use case, at least for me. Right now, I have someone that the external funds transfer process in my current online banking is a nightmare. So I have to go outside to, a P2P app, and I have to transfer money to my cousin who helps pick up my kids after school during the week. And so every week I told her, I said, look, I've got a lot going on and I'm going to forget. Like no matter what, no matter the time, even if I set up a calendar reminder, if I'm in the middle of something work-wise, I'm probably going to forget. Please text or call me, and don't ever act like you can't text or call me because you did a service and I need to pay you. And so I get these text messages on Saturdays. Hey, Haley, just a reminder, you forgot to pay me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I can't set up a daily or every Friday a payment because she gets paid for which day she picks them up. Sometimes it's 2 days, sometimes it's 3 days. So I would like to have a notification from my banking app that says, hey, do you want to pay your cousin and how much? And ask me on Fridays. Ask me Friday nights at 8 when I'm not working. And that's the one time for sure I can say I know I'm not working. That would work perfectly. But yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there. There's a way that agentic banking would work for Haley.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's definitely possible right now. Think about what an OLB would now have to do pre-AI world. Now this becomes a product roadmap feature, right? Now we need to see where do we add this on the screen. Now we need to know how to fight for resources and do all of this. This is where the shift in design, even with teams, will come to where, okay, here's another intent. How do we support this intent? Do we need to connect another API? Do we need the AI to be able to make cron jobs? Very cool. If it does the ability to make cron jobs once, there's not just that intent it opens up. It's like, okay, I need to remind me to check how much I should pay my vendors as an SMB. And you don't now need to build, a new SMB experience, all of this. This is where the bank can start to just lean into everything. One of our things that we work with our banks it's like, how do we market this? How do we get people comfortable with it? Literally, the marketing is just ask it. Just ask it. Like, oh, you have a question? Do you think it can do that? Just ask it. It'll probably be able to do it or help you. And that's what we did with ChatGPT. Everyone uses it maybe the first couple of days, they realize the power, then they lag off a little bit. And then 15 days later, something clicks and you just keep coming back to it and you start using it for more and more things. That would be such a beautiful experience for a bank to see for their customers.
Totally agree. Before we jump into the episode, I want to take a quick second to share something personal. As a lot of you know, I recently joined Sardine, and I don't say this lightly when I tell you I'm kind of obsessed. It actually started back at Money 2020. I sat down with the Sardine team for what I thought was going to be a standard demo. I've even brought a fellow credit union fraud fighter with me because honestly, we were ready to interrogate the product. Instead, we sat there with our jaws open like, wait, what? Watching cases update in real time, seeing OSINT pulled directly into the case without, clicking 10 buttons or jumping between tools. It was one of those moments where you realize, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. And here's the thing. The tech was impressive, but what really stuck with me was the way the team interacted. The way they talked about the problems that they're trying to solve, it felt different. And now that I've been here for a little over a month, I can say that it wasn't for show. This team is smart, driven, and genuinely focused on fixing gaps that fraud teams have been living with for way too long. I'm really excited about what we're building, and I can't wait to bring you along for what's coming next. In the meantime, you can check out more at sardine.ai to learn more info. But we talked about influence for the financial transaction. So I just want to ask, especially as we're still talking kind of on that governance side, what governance structure should exist around these AI systems that influence the financial transactions?
One, as mentioned, like all of your existing governance for financial transactions stays the same. You have your core banking provider, you have your policies and risk management there, that doesn't change. You have your online banking provider, that doesn't change. Now for the financial transactions, what you can provide from here is just more data. If it's initiated through an AI, we know the system requires an OTP check. Boom, there's determinism for you. The transaction can not go through unless the user checked their email that was sent to them by your bank or through text message to then plug that information in. And then from our side, this is where you have to build a very strong engine. It's not enough for us just to say, hey, we're going to take your core banking provider, we're going to take their APIs, we're going to put it in an MCP, and we're just going to connect them to a cloud model. That's not enough. You have to build many architectures of AI agents to be able to make these decisions, to go and do this. And then I need to go back to the bank and I need to be able to show the compliance team, like, here's exactly how the agent thought about it. From one, here's the input that came in. Two, is this even allowed by the bank? We have our own input sanitizer that uses LLM, that uses regex, that uses Sardine, everything to make sure this intent can even pass through. And then you see all these layers of decision making. And then you get that from the payment side and it's like, boom, here you go. You can make your decision of if this was good or not, let alone what you also get from your existing core provider, from your existing fraud provider, from your existing online banking provider. Like, this is where you truly have to make that financial transaction feel safer, smarter. And one of the things I always say is we've just created the greatest technology ever. Outside of fire with AI. It's don't be so scared. The technology is ready today. It's more than ready. It was probably ready last year, but today it's even better. Next year, it's going to be even better. And then how do you trust the vendor to be able to help you with these things and provide all these? This is where you truly need to understand banking also, and not just be, you have to have the banking experience. You need to understand what makes bankers feel comfortable, because in turn, that's going to make them feel comfortable with their customers.
Tylen, you just touched on so many things that I think hit on different aspects of compliance and dispute management as well. I know we want to talk about disputes. When I was first kind of thinking through these concepts of, how we interact and how we manage the risks of agentic banking, it's helpful for me at least, and I'm sure some other compliance folks, to tie it back to compliance systems we already understand and already use in day-to-day basis. How does this tie in? How does this fit in? It ultimately all comes back really at the end of the day to data sharing and understanding that context. So you talked about, how is that context shared? How is the influence or the intent, the instructions, shared as part of that transaction? I think a lot of compliance minds would think back to the travel rule and how critical that is in terms of managing the risks and managing obligations associated with transactions, especially when those transactions do flag risky or kind of behavior that might require investigation, might require reporting, might require dispute resolution in the future. And without proper context sharing, we're really in the dark when it comes to addressing and solving for all of those things. So the travel rule, as it applies to, wires or really any payment, I think kind of applies here in the same sense that, we we are at risk if we don't have enough information about that transaction, about the person initiating the transaction, the counterparty, all of the parties, when it comes to monitoring, when it comes to, risk flags, when it comes to reporting suspicious activity, when it comes to resolving disputes. It's really so key. And I think, how you framed, setting up that system to ensure that all of that data and context is shared is really going to help with that comfort level of feeling like I can manage these risks because I'm getting all the information that I need. That also touches on, I've heard this term many times of know your agent, and we kind of talked about it a little bit before this recording, but I think ultimately it comes down to just understanding kind of who you're interacting with and where the instructions are coming from, and how do I identify where the instructions came from. And of course, that could be solved for by ensuring that that proper kind of data package essentially is shared with the transaction, and identifying an agent-led session versus a user-led session and just understanding how that works. And I think it is comforting, I suppose, for me at least, to feel like, there's layers to how we can implement this, responsibly, layers to how we can adapt our compliance processes that we're already familiar with, that we're already operating with, to just manage maybe new data sets, new data fields, and just new ways of interacting with our consumers, really, at the end of the day.
There's something that you said that made me think about something that could actually help a lot on the fraud and compliance side, which is today in engineering, you basically assume the AI agent has done the code right. But before, what auditing looked like for engineers was, hey, you go code, and then let me as an engineer review your code, and let me go line by line and make sure that it all looks good. As AI kept getting better and better, you kind of absolve the need for that. And really what you ask for is, let me look at how you did your prompt. Let me see what you asked the AI agent to do so that I can understand, did you structurally ask it to do the same thing? And this is where there was this new startup that just came out from the former GitHub CEO that started this to basically attach prompt logs to GitHub code reviews. This is very similar to what you should start seeing in the transaction space.
Yeah.
Where it's like, assume the agent can definitely do the transaction. What was asked of the AI agent to go and do these things so that you can manage? That shifts a lot of how you audit things. You're starting to audit natural language. You're starting to audit conversations. And then you want to see, does this fit the mold of what's a request that should pass through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And how does a tool like Sardine, how do banks' risk tools adapt to monitoring instructions, prompts, natural language? It's a new, same goal, but certainly a new way of monitoring for different structures of data, in a sense, to give you that proper context. Yeah. No,
this is why I would start internally with it, because even with external, like internally, we have our engineers have Cursor, they have Claude Code, we have our own OpenClaw AI agent instances running that could do engineering. If I was to just open this up external, like I can't really audit even if they do it on their own Claude and figure out what's going on. And if they do it on their own GitHub repo, that's the same problem you're going to run into if banks just start opening this up to everyone, because that tech is still being built out, and that's still being developed on like attaching that identity, as you mentioned, like KYA. How do we attach a person's identity to a verified AI agent? Because at the end, who's prompting this agent to go and do those things? And how do we pass that information back? Because if I look at it right now, what OpenClaw opened up, no pun intended, is the ability for multiple people within an organization to act with the same instance of an AI agent. For example, we have our ticket creation system for our engineers. It uses my API key. So it doesn't matter if I use it, if my co-founder uses it, if our head of product uses it, it always looks like the person that created that ticket was me. But that's not true, because first, the AI agent created the ticket. And second, the AI agent might have been prompted by my head of product to create the ticket. So how do I audit to that level of identity all the way down? It's very hard externally. People are still we're building things to help that be easier, but it's going to take a little bit. But if you build it internally, you can always say, okay, This user is authenticated through my OLB. Boom, I have their identity. They're interacting with my AI agent that I've supported. Boom, I have that. The AI agent is the one making the calls because payment provided that information. So now I know Tylen is the authenticated user, because you should not be giving your bank account access to someone that's not authenticated.
Yep.
Right? So built-in trust, AI agents there, and then boom. I think those are the two levels of how to like think about this if you're a bank professional, on where one's very scary and the other one is not so scary and actually very manageable and doesn't change much what you're doing.
So you guys have teed up the next section perfectly, talking about authorization, right? Disputes and maybe even loss ownership. So these are those operational realities. Agentic banking forces the industry to rethink authorization. So the scenario could be a customer disputes a payment and says, well, I didn't authorize that. Yeah, but the customer did authorize the AI agent. The agent initiated the transaction. So then what happens? Lisa, I'll ask you first. How do you think disputes may evolve if AI agents are interacting with financial systems?
Yeah. I think the way that, a lot of what we've talked about is kind of, ties into this very well. But how we think about resolving the dispute and understanding the situation that we're reviewing is certainly going to change. But yeah, its same goal in mind is, was this an authorized transaction? And is this a fair dispute? And of course, the merchant, typically comes into this conversation as well. So I think with we've talked about this in the context of PSD2 or now 3 compliance and ensuring, strong authentication for different types of transactions. As soon as there's a delay between, the instruction or the kind of thought being put out there by the consumer and then the actual transaction, that creates sort of this opportunity to feel like there's a gray area potentially between, what was the intent of the consumer and did they get that? And sort of, was this transaction authorized by the consumer? And so there are frameworks under, PSD2 to think about delayed authorization, merchant initiated transactions, having cards on file that you've pre-authorized. So maybe there's sort of an agents on file kind of concept, like you were talking about a bit, Tylen, of having, pre-authorized agents and, payees in your system. So I think ultimately what I would say it comes down to is, how do we adapt dispute resolution policies to close that gap, to ensure that we have enough context when we are reviewing the transaction information? Do we have enough context to close the gap between the prompt or the instructions that were initially provided by the person and what was actually, executed by the agent? And if there wasn't maybe a human in the loop, and obviously that would certainly help to have that deterministic interaction of OTP, for example. If there isn't that, how would we get comfortable with feeling confident that the actual transaction matches, the goal or the intent of the initial instructions? Part of solving for that, of course, is having that prompt, having that context shared in the transaction record somehow. So it's part of the audit, to audit the thinking, which I thought when you said that earlier, it reminded me of dispute resolution. So to actually have that context is great. So I think one thing that stands out to me, though, as a challenge, like we could all agree that this is the process, we need this to be shared. But whenever it comes to data sharing, and we see this, of course, with just transaction data at its core, is standardization and ensuring that this can be done efficiently and at scale. So we have, wire transaction standards now. We have card network standards. We attempt to standardize this at immense scale across so many different systems and interactions. And I think we're seeing that developing now, and Tylen would love your perspective, but the different card networks, for example, are certainly coming out with protocols to try to implement on both the purchaser, the issuing side, and the acquiring merchant side. And I think merchants certainly have a very interesting role to play here when it comes to kind of mitigating the risk of a dispute and managing risks to consumers when enabling agentic payments at the merchant level. And I think Visa and MasterCard have both put out their strong opinions. There's a lot of standardized protocols being developed to try to add this element of standardization to the messages, to the data sharing, to try to make this process efficient. But I think it seems like the industry broadly agrees, which makes sense, that we can't really manage the risks here, and we can't effectively resolve any dispute if both parties don't have sufficient context to understand, what the intention was and what actually happened.
Sometimes you can just think of AI agents as like children or employees, right? And you think, I'm going to give my card to my kid. I actually don't even know how fraud handles this, but I would assume the onus is on me at the end, but can I go and dispute it? How would they know? I could say I let this go, but then it comes back to, okay, who is Thailand? Who is Thailand giving his card to? Has he ever filed fraud like this before? And then the same thing with an AI, like, it's safe to say that the top models are getting to the point where they can do what you want. But what model are you using? Maybe you're not using a top model. Maybe who's the vendor that's asking you for this AI agent, or that's giving you this AI agent? If it's my own AI agent that I've deployed using OpenClaw, let's say, you can't blame an open source project, right? So at the end, it's your card. Who's the dispute going to go to? I think if I think like, can you pass prompts in? Now it makes sense to me why MasterCard or whoever called it verifiable intents.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually still don't know what that means. Partially, I get to dive into it, but also like, can the fraud, like a sardine type, see what is the conversation that led to this AI taking this action? I'm sure in that case, it would make seeing if this is fraud a lot better or not. But it's like, can we standardize getting that information over? Can we standardize which agent acted on whose behalf? Can we standardize authorization for those things? If you can get all of that, it's way easier, right? But as you said, the bottleneck is who's going to sit it? How do you enforce that?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you build that? Yeah. That oversight from a centralized perspective. It's always the nacha of agent payment instructions.
Which might have to be the case.
Which might be real. Yeah, exactly.
I think what I was thinking about, especially in regards to disputes with this entire, conversation, was when I worked disputes, I loved whenever we would get an on us ATM dispute, because I was like, I don't have to wait on anybody to provide the documentation. I don't need anybody to provide the video evidence. I controlled it all, and it was a click, bing, bang, boom, whatever, pull over all the data I needed, and then I had my decision. And the decision was usually we could, find the car that drove up to the ATM, look up the the license plate. Does that match who is registered to the account? If not, does that person live in the household of the other? And so then being able to bring back that information to our customer, our member, and say, hey, do you know this person? This person is who authorized it. Obviously not sending over the picture in an email, because that ends up on Facebook, and then you have a whole nother can of worms issue, But I was thinking, as we talked in the beginning about the governance of it, truly that you own it, you bring it on in whatever level your financial institution is ready for. When you have those transactions where I didn't do this or I didn't authorize it, but then you have all of the rationale for why it was accepted, why it was processed. Here's that thinking. Here's why we did it, or why the AI did it. Then you've essentially got your on us ATM dispute where you've got all the proof there that you needed in order to know how to move forward. And so I looked at it and I was more excited, because if you dispute this, I already know I have all the data I need to prove that either it was authorized or that someone, exploited a gap or a vulnerability in the system that then we can also pinpoint and fix moving forward.
That's the whole hope, is it can be a lot easier once we standardize all of this. Or once, developers or whoever's building the systems are even told how this thing needs to happen in order to get mass market adoption. Because no one's going to then feed their credit cards or whoever. I think it's also on us to protect the consumers. I know a lot of people don't feel safe giving their credit cards to an AI agent, but I know people are feeling safer and safer because, as mentioned earlier, when, our VP of innovation keeps asking us at a bank, why can't this do more? Why can't this do more? The trust is coming from the intelligence that this thing has. So then the why it can't do more is how the governance of these things. But I will say people are going to start doing it, and they're already doing it because it's just too valuable at this point. as with everything with AI, I think it accelerates everything. And in a way, we're already seeing that with governance.
Completely agree.
Fraud doesn't live in silos anymore, and neither can the tools we use to fight it. That's where Sonar comes in. Sonar is a member-run fraud intelligence consortium built for today's reality, where people don't just transact with banks and credit unions, right? They move across fintechs, marketplaces, merchants, crypto platforms, and even prediction markets. Instead of only seeing what happens inside your four walls, Sonar helps you understand risk across the entire ecosystem a user touches, financial and non-financial. Here's how it works. Sonar brings together shared intelligence from banks, credit unions, fintechs, exchanges, and marketplaces to create a single unified risk view of an entity. You get a clear risk score, and when you need it, the signals behind that score that explain why the risk exists. And unlike traditional enrichment tools, this doesn't require stitching together a dozen vendors or standing up heavy integrations. You connect once, choose the types of intelligence you want, and Sonar returns a risk score enriched with insights from across where that user actually operates. For community banks and credit unions, this is a game changer. You don't need a massive fraud team or advanced data science resources to benefit. Smaller institutions can simply consume the risk score. More mature programs can dig into the attributes and layer Sonar signals into existing controls. And because Sonar is a member-driven utility, it aligns with how credit unions already operate, through shared governance, shared standards, and shared responsibility for protecting members. Even better, Sonar supports compliant data sharing for fraud and AML, including 314B, enabling collaboration without compromising regulatory expectations. Bottom line, fraudsters move fast and jump between platforms. Sonar helps community banks and credit unions move together with shared intelligence, broader visibility, and better decisions. To learn more or explore membership, visit joinsonar.com.
Right. So I think what we are understanding as a part of this conversation is that technology is moving quickly. The governance frameworks often we know take longer, but it doesn't mean that we have to stop innovating, and it doesn't mean that we don't need to prepare for this next phase of banking. I'll just call it that. It's the next phase. It's the phase that we technically should already be living in, but unfortunately, we have lagged behind, especially as it comes to governance and regulatory frameworks and what are we and how should we and blah, blah, blah. So, Tylen, for you, I want to ask, what excites you most about the future of AI in banking?
One of the things, honestly, this is going to sound very cheesy, but we do this every Friday where it's like the people smiles when they use this product or when they use AI in banking. It's just like, I don't think I've smiled with my banker in so long because every time I go there, it's usually like, okay, what mortgage rate are you going to give me? Like, what are you going to tell me that I should be worrying about? What are you going to try to upsell me? Like, this is a way different experience that people have now because it's just more natural. And I think that my daughter is going to grow up in a world where she's definitely going to talk to her bank, and it'll definitely be AI driven, and glad her dad had something to do with that, So I think seeing all of these, like, I think one of the common misconceptions is that this is for like the next generation. It's like, no, this technology does not care on what generation you are. And I have way more smiles from people above 70 years old using this that makes me so happy. That is like, I know we're on the right path, and I know this is how people will bank. So our goal every Friday is we show a different smile of a different customer using the product, and we say we're aiming for 1 billion of these. So that's what we're working towards, and that's what makes me happy.
I love that. And you answered my next question about the misconceptions. I think that's great. This is what we can do today. This is possible. And it's not just for the younger bankers that are coming up. It's for you today. And I think that's great. And again, I mean, I'm not a young banker, and I found you a use case that I would love to have this at my FI. So yeah, love that and appreciate it. And for Lisa, what advice would you give compliance leaders who are beginning to evaluate AI systems?
Yeah, I think if I could zero in on one thing, is talk to teams outside of compliance about this. When you're thinking about doing a risk assessment of this new product or whatever it might be, when you're thinking about your enterprise risk program, talk to your product teams, talk to, the engineering teams that are building your interfaces, talk to your security teams about authentication and how you're thinking about this. Talk to other folks in the industry. I think we always talk about the risks of managing compliance in silos, and having, disparate teams that are kind of all looking at different signals and trying to manage these separately, and how that's not the way to go. We have to bring these conversations together. I think that applies so much to this conversation. So risk teams and compliance teams, go meet other teams at the bank and talk to them about how they're thinking about this and what they're seeing and how to build risk systems together to best manage this. And that will certainly help build kind of that strongest program to make sure you're actually enabling this and creating a strong business around this functionality and not just thinking about it from a risk perspective.
Love that. I love that perspective so much. And then last question, and I'll let you both go. If a bank leader is listening to this episode right now, what is the first conversation they should be having internally, do you think, Tylen?
What bank is going to do this that's going to start taking my deposits? Because this is, like, quite honestly, like, this is we view this as a very much a go out acquire customers type thing. And there has never been a stickier technology product than this, ever. So who's going to do it in the banking area first? And I will also say, once people start having conversations with an AI at your bank, it's very hard for them to leave. Because all those conversations, all that, it's just like when you talk to Claude versus ChatGPT, you probably go to it for different questions based on all the information it has on you beforehand. So it's a real... if I'm the bank CEO, I'm talking to our guys and I'm saying, okay, how long do we have until this actually starts becoming a thing? Because we are launching with banks now. We are launching partnerships with LLBs. And I think that it's like, there will be the difference between the types of experiences we see with people who go and handle agentic banking versus not. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Love it. Lisa, any last parting thoughts on this conversation?
I think I would just encourage, as I always do with compliance teams, encourage them to think about it as, how are we going to help our customers use these tools in the best way possible, in the safest way possible? So, that's the question. And then what does that mean for you and your teams, depending on maybe where you sit in this process? But as a bank, who are the stakeholders that I need around the table to ensure that we're building the best strategy for enabling this, and just encouraging everyone to think about this as an opportunity and not necessarily a risk that we just need to mitigate. So really diving in and ensuring that you're asking the right questions and always prioritizing, the customer in how you set this up.
Couldn't agree more. And Tylen, any last thoughts?
No, I love it. I love this whole space. There's a reason why I also love working with community and regional banks. Like, there's a reason why I live in a small town. I understand how important, like, the personal connection is. And I think, don't take away that AI takes that away. Like, it's a very personal technology, and it is something that improves people's lives dramatically every day. Don't be scared of it. It'll help. People will help people get you comfortable with AI. AI won't help people. And that's why we're here. At the end, it's all still a people business.
For sure. So if there's one thing I hope you listeners take away from this conversation, it's this. AI is coming into banking whether we're ready or not. The question isn't whether AI will participate in financial services, but the question is, will banks design it responsibly? Because fraud is still human-driven. Even when AI is used to commit fraud, it's directed by people. And that means AI, designed well, can actually reduce it. So it can enforce the policy consistently. It can monitor behavior in real time. It can operate within guardrails that humans sometimes miss under pressure. We've all seen that. But only if we build it intentionally. Agentic AI isn't about replacing fraud teams at all. It's not about cutting compliance out of the process. It's about embedding trust directly into the system. And so when money moves, especially in real times, governance moves with it. For community banks, this isn't something to fear. Like Tylen said, it's an opportunity to leapfrog legacy thinking and design infrastructure that's safer, smarter, and more defensible. Because if we don't design AI agents inside the banking system with the right controls, someone else will design them outside of it. And that's not the future that any of us want. So we'll part with stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep moving fraud forward. Thanks for listening to Fraud Forward. Remember, every conversation, every connection, and every insight moves our industry one step closer to stronger fraud defenses. If today's episode sparked an idea, share it with your team or tag me on LinkedIn. I love hearing how you're moving fraud forward in your own organization. Until next time, stay curious, stay resilient, keep moving fraud forward.